How does television mirror society and its progress? Does it reflect societal changes and help to shape them? Is television a frontier that has empowered generations of people, or has mass media perpetuated stereotypes that many within society are striving to break down? These questions run deep, raising further questions about media consumption in America, the boundaries that Americans have or have not applied to media, and more. Our goal for this project was to evaluate women's representation in mainstream media throughout the years, particularly television, and attempt to uncover television's role in the socialization of women and girls. Is the frontier of television propelling women to achieve more or holding women to dated ideals? Has television given women their dues, or is it harboring the growth of real-life American women? The first question to answer in our research on the topic of women in television is, why does it matter? According to the Harvard Center for Education, some 63% of families have television on during dinner, and more than half of American families, 51%, identify themselves as constant TV households. The average American teen watches 31 hours of television per week, the equivalent of a part-time job. That is a lot of television. Many social theories of media consumption suggest that what we consume in the media becomes part of how we think, behave, and shape our expectations. If we take the academic research that proves these theories and couple it with the fact that since 1983, media outlets have been concentrated from several hundred entities to 6 conglomerates, it becomes even more important to question the message that mass media and television produces. With such a small sample of voices controlling the message, are Americans getting a balanced viewpoint, even in their dinner time entertainment, or has the message become standardized in a way? Is television creating differences in the way Americans see women? Is television generating inequality on screen when there is parity in real life? With the knowledge that a handful of media moguls are responsible for producing the programming that we consume each day, it is important to also evaluate women's roles behind the scenes in television. According to a study done by Dr. Martha Lauzen of San Diego State University, in 2012 to 13, of employees in primetime television, women comprised 28% of creators, directors, writers, editors, executive producers, and directors of photography. According to the study, this is a historical high. In the 2010 census, women comprised about 51% of the population in America. Clearly, there is an imbalance in the viewpoints going into the process of creating the programs that we watch. When we look at the record high numbers of women behind the scenes in television production, it seems that would be a good thing. However, with such an imbalance compared to the real-world population numbers, we can begin to understand why the portrayal of women in American television seems so skewed. When television is contrasted with reality from a historical perspective, it is second nature to think back to the golden age of television. Television shows such as Dragnet ruled the airwaves in a time when television demographics were evenly split. Women's shows aired during the daytime, and men's shows were aired in the evening. Shows like Dragnet featured all-male casts. Shows like Leave It to Beaver reified the 50s ideal that a woman's place was in the home. The statistics seem to suggest that in the 1950s, Leave It to Beaver, Dragnet, Father Knows Best, I Love Lucy, and others weren't far off from what was actually happening in the lives of Americans. In 1950, only 16% of American women were employed outside of the home, and the average age of marriage for a woman was a mere 20 years old. Shows like I Love Lucy did feature female characters in lead roles, a progressive move for the time period. However, most of the show's comedy came from Lucy, a bored housewife, getting herself into troublesome situations and her charismatic husband swooping in to save the day. Women's reliance on their husband changed in America largely in part due to the shift in attitudes towards women and higher education. In 1960, nearly half of American women, 49% of those aged 15 to 44, had less than a high school diploma. About 34% had earned a high school diploma, and only 17% had some college experience. In comparison, in 2011, only 20% of women had less than a high school diploma, 21% had graduated high school, and 59% of women had attended college. In 2010, women outnumbered men in higher education. 55% of women in college were compared to 45% of men. The trend of women in college has been climbing since the 1960s, and in 2012, 71% of women enrolled in college immediately after high school. These hard numbers clearly illustrate young women of America placing a high value on their education, yet television shows, many times, paint school-aged women as only interested in gossip, dating, and boys. Studies reveal that the more education a woman obtains, the older she is when she gives birth. The changes that have come with attitudes about women in education have also changed America's attitudes towards motherhood. The percentage of stay-at-home mothers is about 14%, and the employment rate of married mothers with children was up to 65% in 2011, compared to 37% in 1968. 60% of working women are also working moms, and a Pew Research poll found that 79% of Americans reject that women should return to more traditional roles like those of the 1950s. Yet, a study published by the Gina Davis Institute on Gender in Media found that females are more likely to be portrayed as mothers and in a committed relationship than their male counterparts. While some TV shows portray women in leadership roles, or those of power and prestige, very few of those women are also portrayed as mothers. The statistics show that American women are balancing education, work, and their families better than ever before, yet television programming seems to be lagging behind. In America, women represent 47% of the labor force, and the unemployment rate for women is 8.3% versus 9.3% for men. However, television women tell a different story. Only 20% of women in family programs are employed, 25% in children's shows, and 34% in primetime television. The imbalance does not end there, though. According to research on 129 family shows, of 5,839 speaking characters, there was not a single female shown as a political figure, compared to 45 male politicians. Primetime television seems slightly more fair, but only slightly. Women comprise 27% of TV politicians in primetime, 42% of characters shown with financial clout, 38% of academic administrators, and 29% of doctors. Shows like Grey's Anatomy feature a female-centered cast, yet there is still the concern that too much of the storyline revolves around the romantic lives of women doctors, a tendency that doesn't happen as much with male-centered shows. Another shocking disparity in the representation of women on television is in the STEM field. There is not a single woman engineer or mathematician in prime time, yet women make up 24% of employees in the STEM field in America. Primetime television only has 2 women shown as CEOs, yet American women were 25% of all CEOs in 2010. While shows like Mary Tyler Moore paved the way for American women to be shown as able to hold their own in the workplace, television is behind the curve in rendering an accurate picture of the American woman. One statistic in which women have higher numbers than men on television is in the area of sexualization. Unrealistic figures are more likely to be shown on women than men, with teenage roles most heavily skewed. Across primetime and family programs, teenagers are most likely to be thin, with 53% of characters depicted thin. When compared with the real-life statistics that 53% of 13-year-old girls are unhappy with their bodies, and 78% by the age of 17, one has to wonder what role television and media play in a young girl's expectations of her body. Not only are women shown as thinner than the average American woman, but they are oftentimes over-sexualized. Out of 11,927 speaking roles analyzed, 89% of those women were seen in sexy attire. Women from 13 to 64 are 4 times more likely to be shown in sexy attire than men. Adult females, aged 21 to 39, are the most likely to be sexualized, but being a woman on TV seems to be largely about being decorative or sexualized. Another area where women are disproportionately represented is in age diversity of women on television shows. 47% of the U.S. population is over 40 years old, yet only 26% of women on television. When the category of speaking characters is evaluated, that number falls further. Women over 40 are only 11% of speaking characters compared to 23% of male speaking roles. The Screen Actors Guild study on TV notes that women begin to vanish from the scene after age 30, while men just begin to peak, and as characters age, they lose importance, value, and effectiveness. Female characters tend to be younger across the board than their male counterparts. The age bias is unfair to both men and women, yet as with most other biases, the impact falls heavier upon women in television. When presented with information regarding women in television, it is easy to see that there is a lot of imbalance in the ways that women are portrayed on popular television shows. Women are underrepresented, not as educated or career-driven, oversexed, and oftentimes decorative fillers in TV shows. One way that the numbers show that women can be more accurately portrayed on television is more women writers, producers, and directors. Women own less than 6% of television stations, according to the documentary Misrepresentation. When women's voices are part of the creative process, women are more fairly portrayed, have more speaking roles, and are less sexualized. Another way to establish the equal footing of men and women is through policy. Television does seem to have a skewed perspective on women, but does that mirror American policy? 71 countries in the world have had a female president or prime minister, and we know that the U.S. is not one of them. Women in the United States are still paid only 77 cents to the male dollar, and the U.S. is the only industrialized nation without paid maternity leave. Is it possible that television is keeping women in the roles that our national policies have placed them in? We hope that this video has been thought-provoking and will encourage more exploration into the representation of women in mainstream media. Men and women both stand to gain from an equal and fair representation of both sexes in the media we consume.